All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Mainly Hoops podcast, where we're covering some transfer portal news. We're still in the Big Ten. We're covering the Nebraska Cornhuskers today. They had a little bit of action in the transfer portal, nothing too crazy. We're going to start off with Cody. Cody, what was the biggest move that Nebraska made this offseason?
There's I'd say a lot of these players are similar in terms of there's a lot of shooting on this roster. I guess I'll say that first. There's a lot of, I don't know if it's like versatile shooting talent. I think there's a lot of catch and shoot talent here. There's a lot of catch and shoot creation with like guys like Jamarcus Lawrence, who was a boomerang transfer, was originally at Nebraska and up to 23, 24, and then transferred to Rhode Island, came back. He was pretty valuable on that Nebraska team 2 years ago. It was a really good offense. So obviously I think they had more talent than they have on this year's roster, but he played an important role as a shooter on that particular team. And then obviously you bring in a guy like Pryce Sanford, Peyton Sanford's little brother, that can come in and light it up as a corner shooter. He's a great stationary shooter. He's a great movement shooter as well. And I think there's a little bit more in his game than people have seen so far. But I mean, he shot at 40% from three last season. And there's obviously some other pieces on this roster that hung around, like a Sejan, and they're going to get Rink Mass back, who's probably going to end up being the best player on this team when it's all said and done. But I think the most important additions that they made was Kendall Blue coming from St. Thomas and Ugnis Yarosavicius, who's going to be the backup center to Rink Mass. He's going to play probably more spot minutes, play like maybe 15 to 20 minutes a game. Who knows? Maybe they get some time together. Maybe he'll play Rink Mass at the 4 and Yarosavicius at the 5, because they can both kind of space the floor. But I think Kendall Blue is particularly important because I think his dribble creation is going to be extremely important. It's who knows if it's really going to translate, but there's really no other perimeter player on this roster that can really create his own shot or really create a shot for others. And I think Kendall Blue's ability to get downhill and to either score at the rim or make a play for somebody else is going to be extremely important for this Nebraska offense going into next season.
Marcus, do you agree with Cody? Do you think Blue's kind of the standout? Or
Yeah, I mean, I think Blue he can score in a lot of ways from what I've seen, right? He can get off the bounce. He even showed like some sort of like post-up game against some smaller guards. He's kind of bouncy too. You know, he exploded for a few dunks from what I could see. And he's in the 99th percentile in catch and shoot opportunities as well. So can really shoot the ball. You know, you could tell that Hoiberg made a strong emphasis this offseason on bringing in shooters. As you saw, as Cody said, Pryce Sanford, 40%, Lawrence right around 39%, and then Blue at 41.7%. So that was clearly a point of emphasis. And to Cody's point he made about Pryce Sanford, I don't really think that people have really seen the best of Pryce Sanford. Like I do think he has more in his tool bag than what we've been able to see at Iowa. I think he's a little bit more capable than what we've seen to like put it on the deck and occasionally make some plays just with some craft that, you don't get to see a lot of just because his minutes weren't always super high at Iowa, but also, he's a great shooter, 85th percentile in catch and shoot, 1.3 points per possession in spot up opportunities. So I really like the moves. I think the best two are Sanford and Blue though. Lawrence, we've seen him here before, of course. One issue he's kind of seemed to always struggle with is it's like he kind of turns the ball over a little bit, particularly in against more top end teams anyway. I think that's kind of an issue for him. But I think that Hoiberg made some pretty good moves here to bring in some shooting, bring in some more offense, with the losses that they had this offseason.
How do these guys fit in with the Nebraska system? It sounds like pretty well. They got some shooting, but could we expand a little bit more on that? Cody, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think they fit in well from an offensive standpoint. I know Hoiberg is always he's always wanted to address the shooting area of the game, and he wants to bring in as much offensive talent as possible, and then kind of let his defensive system kind of create like the defensive upside for this team, that create turnovers, to all out post denial, rim denial system. And yeah, he kind of just lets the system determine how good the defense is. But I think that kind of caps the ceiling a little bit. There's not a ton of athleticism, especially on the perimeter. Lawrence is a fine defender. Blue is okay. He's not great defending in space. And then you have guys like obviously Sanford. He's pretty limited defensively. He's not a great athlete at all, as much as he can bring to the offensive end. It's going to be a little bit of a struggle, replacing that Juwan Gary position, that type of role. Like Gary was playing the 3 or 4, and he was really one of the best defenders in the Big Ten. And then you're going to have a pretty big downgrade there to Sanford. And obviously the rim protection isn't great either, but I know the rim denial system kind of, takes the pressure off that a bit. Like Yarosavicius is definitely a more offensive heavy big. And I think he has a lot of upside. It's just the amount of time that he's going to get is pretty capped, just because Rick Mast was kind of the engine for that 2023-24 offense. And they're not going to take minutes away from him just because they're bringing in Yarosavicius. But yeah, I think they fit well from an offensive standpoint. This is always something Hoiberg's kind of wanted to do. Defensively, it kind of remains to be seen. They're going to be at the mercy of how many threes the opposition makes. They've always kind of been that way. They allow a lot of catch and shoot threes just to kind of deny the rim. But yeah, I'm not super high on this team from a defensive standpoint right now.
Marcus, let's hear your thoughts. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think to Cody's offensive point, I going back to the point he made earlier, I think the off the dribble creation is going to be a problem here. Essien, not really off the dribble. Sanford, not a ton, right? So it's going to be kind of Blue and playing through Mast, I would imagine, quite a lot this season. Those other guys are just going to be mainly like spot up catch and shoot guys with the potential to occasionally make a play off the dribble when someone overextends on a closeout, which I'm sure they'll get plenty of. Just kind of making the most of it. Defensively, I don't even know. Yarosavicius, is that how you say it?
Yeah.
I think my biggest concern with him is he just doesn't really seem to move all that well. And I know they might be able to get away with it with the style of defense that they play, but he just kind of moves a little bit slowly. And he's not very explosive. He's pretty below the rim player, especially in the offensive end. And so I do worry about that. Obviously he's going to be coming off the bench, so they're not going to be asking a ton of him, but I think that could definitely hinder them defensively when he has to play, or we'll see how Mast comes back after missing this whole last season. So, defensively, I think not great, like Cody said. Offensively, they're going to rely, I think, a lot on Blue and Mast.
Yeah, this team struggled in the Big Ten last year. I would just like to hear you guys' thoughts. What's the expectations for this upcoming year? Pretty early predictions on, have they improved, or do you think they've gotten even worse maybe?
I mean, they kind of fell off a cliff last year. It looked like they were, sitting on the bubble. They were on the right side of the bubble for a while, and then I don't know, they lost 6 or 7 in a row at one point, and then failed to even make the Big Ten tournament, and that kind of threw them out the window. But last year's team from a perimeter standpoint had some more talent. Obviously, Bryce Williams was a really good offensive talent. He was easily the best player on last year's team. I think he had to do a little bit too much. So I think now that they have a little more shooting that Hoiberg prefers, I think that could kind of raise the floor for this offense this coming season. But like I've said, and like Marcus has said, the offensive, the dribble creation is a real problem, and they're going to have to run a lot through Mast in either the dribble handoff game at the top of the key, a little bit through the post. He's not really a post up big. It's going to be some pick and pop with him as well. It's going to be a lot of 2-man game. Problem is, there's really no perimeter, but there's really no pick and roll ball handler to be great in those areas. It looks like it's going to be Blue. I'm not really sure how well he's going to translate. He's coming from the Summit League. I'm never that high on guys coming from the Summit League, because to be frank, it's the softest defensive league in the country. So it's hard to kind of tell how those guys are going to translate. So at this point, I would say, they could very easily miss the tournament with like a ceiling kind of being a bubble team or even like on the 10 line if someone comes along in the creation department or if they just shoot the cover off it or night in and night out.
Yeah.
Marcus, let's hear it from you.
For me, I just think they got worse because I think that obviously they get Mast back, which is huge, but they lost their best player in Bryce Williams, and Juwan Gary was so big on both ends. I don't think that can really be stated enough. So I don't really know. Like I guess I expect much of the same from them this year. I mean, they weren't great, as you said, Cody. They started pretty hot and then finished 7-13 in the league last year. After they started, they were 7-8 at one point, and then just kind of like collapsed down the stretch. So I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. Bubble team might be their ceiling. I just don't really see a very good season for Nebraska. But maybe Hoiberg proves us wrong with some of these shooting pieces he brought in, and they light it up.
Any final thoughts before we wrap up Nebraska?
I mean, they're going to look kind of similar to that 2023-24 team that was more offense heavy than defense heavy. Like last year, they relied on their defense for a large part of the season before teams just started raining in threes against them, and this defensive scheme is always susceptible to that. But yeah, I don't expect a ton out of this team. I could see them getting to the middle of the pack at some point. They've gone on a few runs throughout the last couple of years, but I think their ceiling's pretty capped with the lack of creation on this roster.
Marcus, final thoughts?
Not really transfer portal related, but I am kind of excited to see Mast back. I mean, I really liked him a couple of years ago, and if he'd been healthy last year to play with Williams and Gary, I think it could have been a lot better outcome. Mast is really good, so I'm excited to see him back and see what he can provide as probably the best player on this team.
Yeah, and one thought on Mast as well. Like, I mean, he averaged 3 assists per game 2 years ago. I think they're going to have to play through him even more. I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up getting to 5 or even 5.5 assists. Like he's a really talented passer, and there's a ton of shooting around him. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him like be near the top of the leaderboard in assists per game in the Big Ten, which kind of sounds crazy as a front court player. Obviously, he's not going to match what Braden Smith's going to do for Purdue, but I do think it's really likely that he gets to 5 assists.
All right, we'll wrap things up here. As always, thank you for listening to the Mainly Hoops podcast.